So what's the topic today?
So I figured we talk about something because since all four of us are in here about the same age, we talk about the same age kind of stuff. I will kill you.
I'm sorry. I'm ready. What are we talking about?
We're getting the camera off of Jake for a little bit. There you go.
I'm great.
By the way, I'm the worst. I'm the worst at. I'm the worst at telling people whose names are. Like if I'm around people with names, I'll just name everybody in the room until I get to yours, and that's usually the way it goes.
That's okay.
You're already practicing to be a dad.
I am. Yeah, I know.
We have straight hat, curly, and girl. That's the name of the podcast.
Straight.
Call me straight.
Because I have curly hair, you're straight hair. It would make sense the other way more. Girl, curl, hat, straight.
Straight has a different kind of connotation.
Girl, curl, hat, man.
Well, I'm glad we got that out of the way.
It's Ringo Starr, man in a hat. Normally, you have to name them on the computer. You have to name them something.
So I have.
They're called Hat Man. Ringo Starr, man, I love him.
All right.
Ringo's not even the best drummer in the Beatles.
Ooh,
You ever seen that?
No.
There's an interview with him, and it's like, do you guys think that Ringo Starr is the best drummer in the world? I forget if it was John or who it said, but they looked at him and said, Ringo's not even the best drummer in the Beatles. And Ringo goes, yeah! Because Ringo is Ringo.
Yeah.
Hey, remember when we were going to talk about a thing?
Yeah.
No.
We're trying.
We're trying
So
to,
hard.
but whatever.
But
so
far.
So we're all around the same age. You know, I'm 27, just turned 27. You ever think everyone here is around 25 to 27, right?
Yes.
Yes, is that
we
right?
have 127,
I'm actually 40,
125,
but I don't look it.
and
Do I
226.
look 40?
Shut up, Greg.
You look 80.
Wow.
You wouldn't believe
I
it.
look good for 80.
You wouldn't believe it based on like what we look like right now, but I'm definitely the youngest of all of us.
Yeah,
This beard adds a lot of years.
Take
to
a
me,
look
though.
at how old he looks.
You wouldn't guess I was 25. I've substituted to
Don't worry,
middle
I'll put
schools
up,
and stuff.
put up a side by side of him as when he
Not
was
shaved.
16.
Me with
Or
not
just
even me
shaved.
now
Not
with no
shaved.
beard
Or
versus a beard.
with
I just look.
clean shaven. Yeah.
I look way different.
Make
but
it happen.
Scared my family.
It's good,
once.
man. I know I did.
Put it up,
That's-
Ted.
but that's a different story. But anyway, 25, 26, 26,
Yeah, so
27.
we're around the same age, and we're at the age that we get categorized as what is it called? Millennials?
Yes.
Yeah.
The net
The
generation.
net generation, the people that are all the problems of
Not to
our
be confused
country.
with the next generation, just the net. They left out the X for us for some reason.
No, this is
Because
Y.
the last generation was
we're
the X.
Y
We're Generation Y.
Are we Y generation?
That's why I'm doing
Yeah.
this.
I get confused because
Yeah.
I get grouped
This
in
is
with
Y in sign
millennials all the
language for
time.
those of you who don't speak
Yeah.
ASL.
Yeah.
Well, I guess no one speaks ASL. I mean, you sign it.
But it's a language.
Why? But you don't speak hieroglyphics. We went over this earlier. That's a language too.
It's true.
It was like leet speak. It's like not really speak. You don't speak leet. You don't speak numbers. You just write it. Leet.
I thought you said Lee speak, and I was like, everyone can speak Lee speak.
Speak leet. Just say everyone's name wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyways, so we wanted to talk a little bit about that because it's kind of a controversial topic, especially in the United States, about everything that's going on. And I don't really necessarily know how to start it off, but I think, just me personally, I think the entire concept of labeling an entire generation of people is kind of just a ridiculous concept, and is a concept that I think we need to really stop practicing and doing in this country.
Well, mainly it's just used for historical tracking. It's not really used as like a... It's not supposed to... It gives everybody a label in that time period, but look at everything else that's historical. You gotta give a label to it, or people don't know what you're talking about. Like, if you try to... Like, there's a difference between the Renaissance and the, like... And, let's say, medieval times. Like, there's a huge difference between those times. And there are certain trends that were happening during those times of, like, discovery and innovation. So it's not necessarily that it's a label for all the stereotypes and weird things that happened during that time. It's just trying to piece together history,
But that's-
more or less.
But that's kind of the problem, though, is that people aren't using it for that purpose. They're actually using it to label a group of people, saying that because they're this generation, this is what you can expect from these kind of students. And some of it's true, because stereotypes do come from a form of truth. That's why they exist. but a lot of it is just not even a truth that they have even control of. Like, for examples, like the idea of millennials. No one can get out of their parents' basement and live on their own and do all that kind of stuff. And I was like, well, it's kind of because we can't. It's not something we want to do. Like, I live with my in-laws. Yeah, okay, whatever. I live with my in-laws with my wife, and we're trying to find a new place, and potentially we are actually going to go move something and do something new. But that's not necessarily something that is easy for us to do. And so it's just kind of a catch-22. We're damned if we do, damned if we don't. Try to make the smart decisions, do what we gotta do, but then we get criticized for...
Well, and I understand what you're saying in the same way. It's one of those ideas that it's if you go out and you venture on your own, what's going to happen is you're not going to have enough money to survive comfortably. You're just going to be living paycheck to paycheck if you try and find a place. But if you stay at home, then suddenly you're labeled as somebody who's lazy and can't get out of their own house or get out of whatever. It's really difficult because I'm in the same situation right now. Is I'm just trying to find a job, but every job that I go and try and find is like, oh, you need 2 years experience, and it's like, where do you get the experience if you need 2 or 3 years experience doing something related in this field? I just took years of college.
You just graduated.
I just graduated in December, and I started in 2010. But there's nothing wrong with that. People take a couple extra years.
I'm still in college, and I started before.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. Like, some people it just takes time, and it depends on your situation. Whether it's monetary, whether it's emotional, whether it's just you are struggling. It's
requirements too. Like, more often than not, most people have to take over 4 years of college now.
Well, just
because of requirements that you have to do and everything else. It education degrees, music degree, like even business degrees are 4.5 years, 5 years, 5.5 years, just because you have to take so many of X amount of whatevers to even graduate.
And a lot of times that fifth year anymore is becoming an internship, or it's becoming a student teaching, or it's becoming something that's it's required for you it means this isn't really part of your education, but you have to do it if you want to succeed, if you want to get out in the world and succeed in a certain way. And we're not complaining about that. It's just a fact. This isn't us saying like, well, there's no way you can, because you can do it in 4 years. You can do it. I've known people who graduated with a music degree in 3 years, but they took ridiculous amounts of credits. And that was their life. Their life was making sure you got to class, and there was nothing else outside of that. They didn't work a job, which people complain about. Well, you're in college. Why can't you just work a job? Because I'm taking so many credits to get done what I need to get done, or something like that. I mean, everybody can find an excuse for something, but it's not an excuse. It's just a different culture than what our parents grew up in, and what our grandparents grew up in, and what our kids are going to grow up in. They're going to be in a completely different boat.
And that's the biggest problem, too, that I can't stand about the whole, claiming millennials are lazy or millennials just don't understand it or millennials can't figure things out. Except the advice that we get, because I feel like a lot of people of our generation actually do go to elders and try to figure things out. I mean, I know I do. I know I talk to my parents all the time, but they have no idea how to answer the questions I have. Like, how do I functionally go to school full time when I can't afford that, and then also do full-time load of work because I financially can't afford anything else, while I'm also taking a ton of loans out because there isn't anything that benefits me to do what I gotta do. It's a crazy concept that's like, I don't want to do the typical, well, my life's just not fair kind of thing, but it's at the same time, there's not a reasonable answer to solving the solutions that we have in this country. Instead, we just get blamed for problems and saying that we complain about everything. We're actually not. I feel like complaining is not complaining when you're explaining your situation to someone.
Or when you're asking about something.
Yeah.
You don't complain. Again, I mean, everybody says this, but it's the truth, because our parents went to college, had part-time jobs, and were able to pay off their student loans with the money they made from those part-time jobs. And that's just the fact. We can't go there.
It's mind-boggling.
Think about Central Michigan, 1 credit hour. They've just increased it to like $415 a credit hour. So if you want to take a 3-credit class, That's $1,200 or $1,300 for one class for 3 credits. And there are jobs, even the job I work now, I get paid $10 an hour, and if I work 20 hours a week for a month,
that's still not enough.
That's $200 a week.
I worked 60 hours a week in college.
That's $800 in a month.
Above minimum wage, both jobs. And I took anywhere between 15 and 17 credit hours. And I made enough money to pay for my apartment because it was cheaper to live in an apartment than in the dorms, and to pay what my loans wouldn't cover for school.
Well, that's exactly it.
And that was at 60 hours a week.
And that's what I'm saying.
Jobs.
These things, it's not just student loans you're paying off. It's not just, you're paying for an apartment, and the apartments aren't getting any less expensive. And that's assuming, you know what I'm saying? Like,
right, but they're cheaper than dorms.
They're cheaper than the dormitories, and that's just because the dormitories have upkeep and whatever. And if you can find an RA job, or if you can find an MA job, or whatever each school calls it, then more power to you, because you get that room and board, and that's also a job, and you don't get paid a bunch of extra money for doing that. But
honestly, I don't know. I think the funniest thing about this whole millennials ruining whatever, or millennials having this specific stereotype or whatever it is that every generation that comes through that changes something due to technology difference, due to economic difference, due to whatever, they are blamed for or are the cause of whatever that change may be.
I know.
It's not, it's really not just millennials. Think about how the 70s were this awful era of just everyone doing drugs and sleeping together and free love. Like, they were thought of ruining the idea of marriage and of free will and all of that kind of stuff, but they also were out there protesting all the time, and they were the ones that really started working and going to school, and they did all of these things that also helped to change the idea of acceptable social standards that later on in the 80s and 90s were almost expected for people to do.
Well, and living life, if you pay attention to history as well, living life and watching, movies and stories of the 1920s, the Roaring 20s, you gotta tell me that they didn't know how to party?
Right.
They were partying probably harder than even people modern day party, because they had disposable income up the ass to do so, and they were also just doing a lot of crazy stuff because there was no limits. There was no mistakes, to be had there that wasn't worth going through the things that we see modern day. It's crazy. We literally live almost 100 years later in that time, and we're still being pegged. The younger generation is always being pegged for just the problems for everyone else's lives. And it makes me laugh, because it's things take time. Don't you realize, especially I have grandparents who, when I was your age, I had a family. I got a loan to build a house, and I was able to run my own company at the age of 23. That's great. But that's not possible now, because we don't have an infrastructure of entrepreneurship that can be built in this country with what the resources we have. Some people can, some people can't. It all depends on what you want to get into. And the thing that makes me even laugh much more is that, people that do talk about entrepreneurship and talk about all of the things that millennials are doing to make money, it's just a form of ridicule. For example, YouTube. The idea that, people get on YouTube and get paid to make videos for a living, do vlogs and do stuff very similar to what we're doing right now. We're not trying to necessarily get rich off of this, but it's just something that we're doing while we try to pursue dreams and goals of ours.
We just being on camera.
This is what?
We just like being on camera.
Yeah, we do. But but the point is, what I'm trying to say is this: why are we being made fun of or ridiculed for doing something outside the box that is potentially creating an income for a family and doing all that stuff? As much as we may not want to become this, the things that Markiplier does every single month, where he does raising charities and doing funds for all that stuff, he spends thousands of dollars doing that kind of stuff. Don't tell me that he's not doing what he needs to do to be part of human society. Mm-hmm. He's actually being super active and playing that role very, very well. You know, that's helpful to those charities that he donates to. That's helpful to all the issues that's going on and stuff. And instead of praising that, and don't get me wrong, a lot of people praise that, but instead of praising that as a whole, they go, well, he's good at doing it, but why can't my family do what is a good job? And that's also the greatest thing about that too, is like, what does that mean?
Right.
Like, do we just all want to become like, do you want your kid to all be like football players, lawyers, and doctors, or do we want to actually have them pursue something that works and benefits them and also does create a society? That's the other thing too. Like, I am a huge component of people working in this country. Like, I don't believe that people not working because of medical issues or health issues, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of people that deservingly, you know, are on those programs, and I support that. But the ones that say they do and find ways to cheat that system is something that I don't condone or support by any means. And I hate the fact that people do it way too much in this country. But at the same time, I also am a huge component of finding ways for people to work and make enough money to live off of that. And that's, I think, the whole point of this anyways. Why wouldn't you want to do that?
Well, and there's so many things that aren't getting done that could get done in that sense that, I mean, they still get the same amount of money handed to them, but you take your skill set and put it towards something that helps other people. I mean, how many roads do you see are completely dirty? How many things do you see just need someone extra there to help with stuff? So instead of just handing a check to someone every month, you say, hey, even if it's just 10 hours a week, let's put your background and knowledge to better use, and you still get that same check. Like,
the biggest thing I have with our generation, and I think this happens with every young generation that's getting out there trying to figure out the world, and the thing that goes on is that we see problems, and immediately the people, you know, us, the young generation, go, why aren't these problems being resolved? And we have questions, we start answering. And now the thing about our generation, because we're millennials, we have access to more information than any other generation has ever had in the past. And we're also young, and our brains are able to be more mobile than any other generation. So we do actually look up research. We do actually pay attention. There was actually a study that looked up saying that we are the most people out of all the generations right now that are in libraries. So we're actually, like, people's like, you know, millennials need to stick their nose more into books. We are, that we're in libraries. Maybe it's an electronic library, but it's still a library. We are paying attention to a lot of the stuff. And it's really frustrating that we want to find solution to problems, and then we talk about those solutions to problems, and immediately we get attacked because it's like, well, you know, you can't live in your black and white world where, you know, this is bad and this is good, and therefore you gotta, you know, just do the good thing, because there's a lot more to it. There's a lot of compounding problems on top of what you're just saying. I'm like, really? Is there? Or is it the fact that we did actually research things and realize that this is really bad? Like, there's a lot of issues that we can talk about and have a lot of discussion on. You know, global warming, an issue. The fact that, you know, we, especially Michigan, like right now, we're in Adrian, Michigan right now. We're not too far away from the Flint fiasco that's going on in Michigan, and that's a horrible thing. People in America, citizens of America that are basically being blamed for having really bad water, and they're not fixing the problem. They're just blaming it on the citizens for having really bad water when you were the one that put the water main into the city. How is that solving the problem? You know, and
that's the thing, and no one wants to take blame.
Exactly.
No one's willing to step up and say, well, that was my fault, or this was my bad, because all of a sudden then, I in my opinion, I feel like, and I mean the older generation is more, and then it's not to say that, like, we don't do it too. Somebody owns up to something that they did wrong, we're going to look at them and say, yeah, that was your fault. But if they're straightforward and if you say, like, here's what happened, here's why it's my fault, here's how I plan to fix it. If you lay out those things, people are going to be much more likely to be like, okay, that's not really cool. And if it's a big problem, then, okay, you get fired. Like, and it sucks, and you lose your job and whatever, but everyone knows it's your fault anyway, and everyone hates you.
There's so many that you can get. Who cares if you lose your job, right?
Oh, right, yeah.
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 I'm just saying though, like at that point, something's got to be done.